Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm John. I'm excited to chat with you guys today. We get so many questions about this particular subject, and I'm hoping that today we can shed a little bit of light on it. Thank you so much for joining us. This will be probably 45 minutes of your day that I really hope is going to contribute to your business and the success that you have. For those of you who are familiar with this concept, hopefully this is a great reminder. For those of you who are new to this exploration of what an hourly rate is for a professional painting contractor, I hope you'll get a lot out of this webinar today. So a couple things to note. Again, my name is John. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at PaintScout. And over the next 45 minutes, we're going to walk through this particular subject. In order to do so, it can be really helpful is a pen, piece of paper, just to do a few math calculations. I know that word can be scary to most of us, but it's so important in order for us to make sure we have the right numbers and understanding of this concept. Second point to note, if you have questions, and please, if anything comes to mind, we're going to try to answer those at the end. Write those in the Q&A, not the chat, in the Q&A, and write them as they come to you. Although we're going to be answering them at the end, we're going to want those to pile up and hopefully have a good discussion at the end. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen here and get into the presentation here. So, okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. All right. So once again, this webinar is entitled How to Calculate Your Hourly Rate, Step-by-Step Method. I hope you're in the right place. If this is not of interest to you, now's a great time to log off. But if it is, yeah, join us in the exploration of this concept. So before we start, a brief history of my experience in the painting industry. I've been in the industry for 15 years, running a business, painting business, and really passionate about sales and estimation. I feel like that's a major part of our industry that can improve. There's a lot of professionalization that can occur when we sell better. And like I think all of us know, every painting project starts with a sale. And in order to get that right and make the money we want to do, we got to make sure that our estimates are correct. And that really gets me up in the morning, that motivates me. Part of this discussion today is, you got to have some historical numbers. If you don't, that's okay. We're going to go through what it means to not have historical numbers. But a profit and loss statement is going to help tremendously in understanding your hourly rate. So, you may not have those available today. I totally get it. It makes sense. But you're going to get a link to this video, this webinar later. And it's a great chance to go through this video maybe a second, third time, just to get a clear understanding of this concept with your numbers. And when I say your numbers, it is independent of every company. Every company's hourly rate is going to be different. And we're going to get into that, of why that is. But it's important in the discussion to understand that the price that you charge a customer is very different than somebody else. And it's related to your costs. So that said, at the end of today, I hope that you're going to have an understanding of what every hour should cost to your customer so that you are making money. Final point here is that at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you a little secret. And some of you guys already know this secret, but for those of you who don't, please stick around. We're going to look at an average hourly rate based on industry averages and how to calculate that for your business. So let's get into it. Quickly, we're going to do a poll here just for everybody who is in the webinar. And that poll is, what do you currently charge per hour? You can take a second and just answer that. That'll be really helpful. It's going to help us get the discussion going. Give you a minute. Again, all your answers are private. Nobody's going to be shared this information. We're just curious, and I think it gives you a chance to start thinking about what you're charging. All right. So we've got some answers in. We've got a couple people who are low. We've got a lot of people who are over $70 an hour. And the idea today is to help you get an understanding of why that number is what it is, and back check that a little bit. So thanks for everybody for participating in the poll. We're going to do 2 more throughout this presentation, and they're just super helpful for us to understand how everything's working. So all right, let's get into it here. So before we start to talk about hourly rate, I want to talk about where companies start their estimation journey and where they end up. For a lot of painting contractors, this is a very familiar process. When you start, the first stage is WAG, or wild ass guess. That's not my term. I'm stealing that from many people before me. But what it means is that you are guessing at your price. You show up, you get a price, and the most important part is you get a job. Whether you make money or not, you'll find out later, but you are working, and that's what's important. And once you get burned a couple times with that method, you start to move to stage 2. And that's adding intelligence, adding experience, or smart wild guessing. And what that allows you to do is to start to say, hey, you know what, I didn't make money in the last job, but in order to change that, I'm going to charge a little bit more on this one. Or, you know, I'm losing too many jobs, so I'm going to start charging less. The reality of that is that you're still guessing at the jobs, and that can be scary. You can be losing your shirt without knowing it, and that's at least a better version than wild guessing, but you're still guessing. So the third stage is a systemized estimation approach, and we see the majority of large professionalized companies using a systemized estimation approach, understanding why they're charging what they're charging, allowing them to build a team without having to have the experience needed to properly estimate using the SWAG method. So that's where the hourly rate falls into, is it gives you an understanding of your business and allows you to start to sell with confidence and in a way that's going to allow you to build your business properly. So it's going to deliver 3 benefits. First, you get consistent pricing when you systemize. You're not going to have the problems of guessing. You're not going to be losing your shirt without knowing it. The hourly rate fits into this discussion. Second, you're going to make money. We're all in business to make money, and by understanding your hourly rate, it's going to give you an understanding of how to produce properly, how to charge properly, how to run your business properly, and make the money you're looking to make. Third, you're going to be able to grow your business. This means that you're going to allow you to build a team, a sales team, people who can replicate your method of sales, sell in a way that is profitable, build your team, build your sales, and give you consistent results. So a lot of benefits there. And for those of you who are here, who are in the discussion, who already have a systemized approach, you'll understand these 3 points. But today we want to break down what that hourly rate is so that you can have a better, more consistent understanding of how your business operates. All right, I'm going to start by breaking it down. What is your hourly rate? So in order to do this today, the best way to do it is to get your historical numbers together. This is your profit and loss statement. Break them down by the hours worked by your team, your production team. Determine your profit requirements. That's different for every business. Then we're going to add them all together, and voila, we should have an hourly rate that's going to make sense for each and every one of our businesses. All right, let's break it down. Every business or painting business really has 4 major areas. We've got labor, we've got overhead, we've got paint and supplies, and we have profit. When we start to look at a painting business this way, we can start to look at every hour this way as well and break it down into these individual areas. In essence, making our hourly rate a direct reflection of our business. And that gives us a lot of power. So first point we're going to make here is that for some of you, paint and supplies is something you added extra. You add that additional to labor costs with overhead and profit. That's totally fine. You know, if you have a way that's systemized that is allowing you to make money, that's great. And we're not advocating for any change. But today we're talking about an all-inclusive hourly rate. And what that means is that it gives you speed as well as accuracy when doing estimates. And to do that, adding paint and supplies can really help. It makes it more efficient. It makes it more cohesive in order to not have to have details or experience come into play. And we'll talk more about what that means, because I'm sure some of you have some questions and concerns, and rightfully so. All right, another quick poll. Do you feel you have a clear understanding of your hourly rate? First answer, yes, tell me more. Second, no, but tell me way more. And third, why am I here? I'll give you a minute to answer that. All right, let's see the results. All right, well, I'm thankful that nobody responded, "Why am I here?" That is so helpful. But we have about a 50% split from yes, but tell me more, no, but tell me way more. So thank you very much for responding. That really helps in understanding of whether this is still important to everybody. Or else I'd just end this right here, which is not what I was hoping to do, but we'll move on. All right. So now we're going to start by breaking every individual piece of our painting company down by the hour. I'm going to walk you through that. First step, we're going to look at labor. So how do we get an average hourly labor rate? The best way to do this, or the way that's easiest, is to add up all the hourly rates for each painter on your team, inclusive of labor burden. If you're not familiar with that term, labor burden is the cost that you're going to pay for every hour that somebody works. That's going to be employment insurance, workers' compensation, things like that. And that the things that are costs to your business, maybe not paid out to your staff, but definitely a cost. So we're going to add that up, all of our painters together. Then we're going to divide that number by the number of painters on your team. This is going to give you your average hourly labor rate. Let's look at an example. Here's a theoretical team of 3 people. Your team could be bigger, it could be smaller, but the same process applies. A great way to do this is by an Excel spreadsheet or some type of a way for you to amalgamate all of your staff on one area so that you can make adjustments quickly. Here we've got Jim, we've got Kyla, and we've got Shelly. You can see their basic wage per hour. You can see a labor burden of 10%. That number of 10% is a random number. It's going to change depending on the state or the province that you're in. And you need to know that number. You can ask your accountant. You may already know that number, but definitely a part of this is that number is going to change. Once you figure those 2 rates out, your basic hourly rate and your labor burden, we're going to add those together for an all-in hourly rate. Then we're going to add everyone's all-in hourly rate together, and we're going to divide that by the number of staff, which in this case is 3. So in this example, it's all of the rates added together is $70.95. There's 3 painters, so it's an average hourly rate of $23.65. A couple assumptions there, that each individual employee is working the same amount of time or roughly the same amount of time. That is important. So if you have someone that's part-time, we wouldn't want to allocate less to them in this equation. But this is going to give you a rough guide for what your average hourly labor rate is. And it's a very important number when we start to look at how to break this down, and as well as your industry average approach. All right. Second, now we've got our labor. Let's look at our overhead. To get your average hourly spend on overhead, you're going to need to look at your spend on your overhead historically. Overhead in this case is referring to everything that's not related to doing the job. So this is your marketing expenses, your cell phone, insurance, gas, vehicles, etc. You're going to get this information from your profit and loss statement, and you want to get it over as long of a period of time as you feel comfortable. You feel like it's an accurate representation of your business. That might be a year, that might be 3 months. You need to kind of figure out what that means for you. But we're going to take those expenses, and we're going to divide that by the number of hours that painters worked on site over that period of time. Let's look at the example. So here's the 3 months of expenses for this company. Overhead expenses, they have $32,508. Hours worked by the painters were 1,440. That's full-time for 3 people. And that gives us an average overhead spend of $22.58 per hour for that 3-month period. So this is where your profit and loss statement comes in. Grab that number, review this video, try to plug these numbers in so that you can get a sense of what that means for your company. This is an example for this figurative company, but gives you an idea of how this calculation happens. All right, step 3, paint and materials. Your material costs for a project would include your paint, coating, and coatings for the project, any supplies you're using. And like I mentioned before, there's a kind of a split in the industry of how this is done. Some people prefer to add in paint and materials after, in which case you would need to take your overhead, your labor, and your profit and put those separate from your materials. And that can still be a great way to produce an estimate. In this particular case, though, we're talking about an all-inclusive labor rate, or all-inclusive hourly rate. So it costs you're charging your customer per hour. Having to add materials and supplies in can be very tedious. And a lot of contractors decide to move away from doing an individual project approach and look at it more as a holistic approach. So a percentage or a cost that you're incurring per hour for everybody's working. That may be new to you. Like I mentioned before, that's a massive leap of faith that some people have to take. And if that's not for you, that's okay. But let's discuss what this actually means if you do want to include this in your hourly rate. Here's an example of that company we were talking about. I should have named it. I don't know why I didn't name it, but it's a made-up company. And they've got material expenses of $13,932. Again, the painters worked 1,440 hours in that 3-month period, which gave them an average material spend of $9.68 per hour. The longer period of time you're going to have, the more that number is going to be indicative of the average. So keep that in mind. We're going to also talk about later about what it means if these costs start to change and how to keep that in perspective for what your hourly rate actually means. So this is historical, but you can also make predictive decisions going forward to make sure that's covered for your estimates that are maybe a couple weeks out or a month or 2 months out. You can start to change your hourly rate to reflect that. All right, so here's our example so far. Labor, we have at $23.65 an hour. Overhead, $22.58 an hour. Paint and supplies, $9.68 an hour. The last thing we need to figure out is our profit. All right, step 4, profit. The idea of profit, we get a lot of questions about this here at PaintScout, and that's that, what is the right amount of profit to be making? What's the percentage I should be trying to achieve? And unfortunately, the answer is it's really up to you. That margin is going to be dependent on the market that you work in, what your market's going to support, how strong you feel as though your sales are. And it's a decision that you need to make really upfront in order to try to achieve that goal. So, industry averages maybe 5 to 15% of profit. You might want to shoot for more, and that's great. But if you make a decision in your hourly rate, you can understand how much profit you're going to make if you produce jobs properly. So let's take a look. And please forgive me, it's another math equation, but let's work through it together, and I know we can do it. All right, so your all-in hourly rate is equal to the average labor rate per hour plus your overhead spend per hour plus your paint and supplies per hour divided by 1 minus your profit margin. In this particular example, that would be $23.65 plus $22.58 plus $9.68 divided by 1 minus 0.1. And that 0.1 is reflective of a 10% profit margin. So when we do the math, this gives us an all-in charge to the customer of $62.12 per hour to achieve a 10% profit margin. So let's take a look here. This is an example estimate using a time-based production rate, and hopefully this will become clear how this works. So if you estimate you'll take 11 hours to paint this room, and your hourly rate is $62.12 per hour, then this project is going to cost you 11 hours times $62.12 per hour, or $683.32. That's going to allocate time for your painters to do the job, as well as your overhead, as well as it's going to allocate the cost for your materials and your profit. So if your team produces this job in 11 hours, you are going to make a 10% profit on this job, assuming that all of those other elements have been done correctly. All right. Now that their minds have been, made into mush, we're going to look at how to use industry averages as a quick and dirty way to actually see if your hourly rate is in line with what it should be. So here's a quick look at some industry averages. These have been we've built these industry averages off a wide variety of data that we have, both internally, externally, from the PCA, from a lot of different avenues, but it gives you a rough look at what a painting company might look like on the surface, on average. So on average, every company that is an average company is spending about 40% on labor. They're spending about 15% on paint and materials. Average spend on overhead is about 30%. That's assuming you're looking for a profit margin of 15%. I will also mention here that these numbers are going to be different for every company. It's important for you to understand how your company operates and where you want to be, what you want to try to achieve. So it's possible that your labor spend might be less, or your spend on overhead might be more. Once you understand these percentages, it's going to give you a good chance to make quick changes to your hourly rate without having to do all the equations we already went through. The most important part is that it just adds up to 100%. So keep that in mind as we're trying to understand what the company looks like as a whole. And that's also what every hour you charge is going to look like as well. So let's take a look here. We're going to do an example, and this is actually a question for everybody here in the room today. And we want to see whether you can do this math, and then we're going to show you how to do the math. So let's say that your average hourly labor rate is $22 per hour. If labor should be 40% of your company's cost, how much should you be charging per hour? It's a great chance to use your pen and paper, see if you can figure this out. We'll give you 2 or 3 minutes, and we're going to run a poll. All right, we'll give everybody 1 more minute here, and then we're going to go through the math. All right. So here we have, I'm not going to go through the results just yet, but we're going to do the math to help everyone understand this question. The reality of it is, though, is we're split amongst every single answer. And I think it's helpful for us to know that there's a way to actually do this equation. We're going to show you how and why it's so valuable for each individual company to do this quickly. So if you don't get the answer right, that's fine. I mean, that's why you're here today. So let's take a look. All right. Oh, we already did the poll. Okay, so let's take a look at the math equation. This will give you a sense of how to do this. And I'll walk you through it, and then I'm going to go through just a couple of things that are really important. So this is cross multiplication. It's grade 9 math. I'm sorry if this brought up some PTSD for you, but we're here. We're going to do this together. So in this equation, we've got $22 over your rate that you charge is equal to 40 over 100. So 40 over 100 is equal to, so it's 40% over 100% is equal to $22 over the rate that you charge. All right, so let's break that down. It's now going to be cross multiplied. $22 times 100 is equal to 40R. We're going to do that multiplication. So 2200 divided now by 40. That's going to give us a rate of $55. So what that means is that if your average hourly rate, once you add up all of your painters on your team, including labor burden, is $22 an hour, that's the average rate, and you want to be fitting into an average company making labor 40% of your company's cost, you need to be charging $55 per hour in order to make that happen. Now, a couple things that you have under your control here. If the $22 an hour, say your company is different, once you do that number, that actual calculation, you can just simply change that number in this formula, and it's going to give you the result that it be more applicable for your company. The other number that you can change here is the 40 over 100. If you want labor to be 35% of your costs, you can put 35 in there instead of 40, and you're going to be able to get a number that's going to be indicative of what 35% labor cost means for your company, assuming that you want to spend 15% on paint and materials, 30% on overhead, 15% on your profit. So that's a quick and dirty way of doing it. I'd suggest, if you can, if you don't intend to actually watch this again, this whole webinar, take a quick screenshot of this, because this is a good chance for you to just back check quickly whether you're operating kind of at an industry standard level. So again, this number is not to say that you can't charge more than this, but what we're trying to achieve today is give you a baseline understanding of what you need to charge to make money. So if you're looking at this saying, well, I charge way more than that, that's okay. I mean, that's great, but at least you know what your floor is so that you can still ensure you're making money. And that assumes, if you're going to be reducing prices, or if you're going to be trying to do discounts, that type of thing, you know where you need to be at to still make that profit margin. All right, so the next thing that's important is you got to back check once in a while. This rate is going to fluctuate, and great way to do that is check quarterly or yearly. Just get those overhead numbers together again. Check to make sure that you're still making the money you're hoping to achieve. If you've never heard of job costing, great thing to start doing if you can on each job, to look at whether you're making the money you're hoping to. We'll be running a webinar in the future about job costing as well, but don't have the time to get into it today. It's a longer discussion. Another great time to check your labor, or to check your rates, is making sure that your labor rate is staying within a range. If you start to find that you're having to hire people at higher rates, you need to adjust your hourly rate in order to still achieve the business goals that you have of making a profit, covering your overhead. So that's a good thing to do as well. Maybe that's more often than quarterly. Maybe you find that there's a big swing in the summer, just towards the end of summer, so you got to charge more at the end of summer to account for that. The other time that's great to look at this is when materials change prices. I'm sure all of us have experienced some raise in material costs over the last year. In some cases, it's been really dramatic, and that's a good thing to look at and try to really rejig your hourly rate to reflect that material price change, or else you're going to be, again, losing money and not operating properly. So finally, a couple takeaways before we get to questions. I hope that today you're able to understand what your minimum hourly rate should be through those two methods, and that's going to give you a chance to dig into your business and operate properly. Also, once you start to produce estimates with a replicatable system, you're going to be able to produce the profits you're looking for, and that's really what we're hoping for here at PaintScout, is for you to grow your business, make money, get that life back that you were hoping to have, and just enjoy what you're doing. Third, having the levers to understand your hourly rate and combining that with a time-based estimation approach is going to allow you to easily adjust as your business changes. That's the major lever you have. Time to do projects shouldn't change dramatically. It's really how much you're charging for that time. So keep that in mind. And again, we always want to mention this. This is a holistic business approach. If you're operating on a job-to-job basis, these types of metrics may not play out perfectly, but this type of an approach is going to work out great if you're shooting for running your business for a year and hitting certain margins and percentages. And so I think we can all get tied up sometimes in a job-to-job basis. And you want to be successful in every job, don't get me wrong, but it's important also to look at it holistically and understand that there's ways to build your company that don't revolve around every minor detail. And I think that's what this system allows you to do. So I want to thank everybody for your time. We're going to get to some Q&A. If you have some questions, please write them in. We've got probably another 10 minutes here before we'll let everybody go. And so, yeah, happy to answer any questions. All right. First question here from John. So are we using 8 hours to get the basic wage per hour? The answer for that is you want to assume people are working full time if they are. And that's probably a fair assumption, but ultimately you're just, with this approach, you're looking at each person working 1 hour together and then trying to kind of elaborate on that or expand that. So yeah, hopefully that answers that for you, John. If you need more clarification, feel free to type in. Should we include fringe benefits in the labor rate? Yeah, absolutely, George. That's a great question. Ultimately, you need to know the cost for each of those hours someone's working. I think that's a great place to put it. If not, including that in your overhead isn't going to sway this equation too much. It just has to be allocated somewhere. So another question from John, will this hourly cost system work if I'm using subcontractors? So yes, it should, and it really depends how you set it up with your subcontractor. There's a number of ways that we know, I'm not sure your particular situation, John, but setting it up with the subcontractor so that they're receiving a percentage of the job is still going to mean that you're receiving a percentage of that additional markup on the job, assuming that you've estimated the correct hours. Now they have to be bought into your pricing model and make sure that's fair, I'm sure, but you will still see, if you're doing a split, that split is going to be a split of the business directly. All right, question from Gigi. How do you do location-based PDR rate in metro large city like Chicago, which is more expensive? So in order to do, I believe if I understand the question correctly, if you are using a production rate in a large city like Chicago, you need to go through this system, make sure that your hourly rate is reflective of the labor that you're paying, the costs that you have. They're going to be more expensive than someone in maybe a smaller city or a smaller area. And so it's all reflective of your cost in this system. And so once you get your numbers together, you can just understand what your costs are and what your profit needs to be and how much you need to charge, which I think is really helpful for all of us because that dollar per hour is going to be different for everybody. All right, Andrew Sefton, thanks for the question. How does this translate to production rates and or piece rates? So that's a wonderful question. So when you break down your hourly rate, you have an understanding of what each hour costs your business. You can start combining that with a production rate, so a time-based estimating system. And that's going to allow you to charge properly for every hour that you're billing for. So a good example might be, if you have a home and you go in our production rate system and you find it's 100 hours, if your hourly rate is correct and your team produces that job in 100 hours, you're going to be able to make the profit that you're hoping to make. Piece rate, same thing, I would say. Hopefully this system, because it's based on time, if you're allocating a time as a piece rate system, you're going to be able to also use that hourly rate for that as well. All right, Michael Murray, longtime listener, first-time caller. What kind of watch are you wearing? Thank you, Michael, for the question. Michael knows that I'm passionate about watches, and I'll tell you later, Mike. How about that? Happy to have a discussion offline. Neri, for estimating, I guess that I am using subcontractors. Will we need to know approximate hourly rate for the sub? Correct. Neri, again, great question. Again, that comes back to how you're paying your subcontractors. If you know a rough hourly rate that you're hoping for them to achieve, that's going to be, attractive to those subs, you can definitely frame it. And here's the amount of hours at an hourly rate. Often, though, in a subcontracting model, we'll see that people will give an allocation of money. So this job is worth this much, and because you have an understanding of the hours, you're going to be able to, confidently give that project over to that sub, knowing that it's priced fairly, that they're going to be happy with the estimate you've given, And then if they're not, you're going to be able to, review that and see where you need to make changes in order to make that happen. So, yeah, you might be estimating on an hourly basis, but it doesn't mean you have to pay on an hourly basis. All right. Another question here from Gigi. Thanks for all the questions, guys. These are great. So do production rates change for commercial? Do we need to add in costs to or variations to commercial work? Is there additional costs? Yeah, great question there, Gigi. So 2 things that we see with commercial work. One is that your production rates are going to likely change. That type of work is production work. You're going to be able to produce more. So that's going to affect the amount of time that a project takes. But the second thing that you're going to need to look at is equipment. And that isn't allocated in this. You're looking for what type of materials or what type of equipment. So man lift, high reach equipment, that type of thing, you'll have to add in additionally for commercial. So ultimately you'll have hourly rates to understand the cost to your customer. Because the project takes a different amount of time, that's going to be reflected in that equation. And then you have to add in your equipment. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Thanks, Gigi. Oh, Michael Murray. Mike's got a real question now. If the owner of a company is painting, how should they calculate their hourly rate when figuring out the average wage? So if you are if you're painting on site, this is a great question, one that we get a lot. You need to allocate a fair wage for what you feel it would take to replace you. And if that means that you feel like you're a master craftsman and you're going to need a master craftsman to replace you, you need to figure out what the going rate is in your area for that specific role. And that's a great way for you to back check your numbers as well for job costing and for you to start to get out of the day-to-day operations, because that's built into your costing. So Mike, thanks for the question. Always appreciate having you on. If anybody else has any other questions, now's a great time to type them. Oh, got one more question. Awesome. I'll wait here for a second for you. All right, Nicole Keane, thank you for the question. So where do we calculate office worker costs? Yeah, so that's going to fall into your overhead. Any administrative costs that you have, including office admin, salespeople, that's going to fall into your overhead. And so when you're doing that equation for your average overhead spend, you need to be able to look at those costs all together, add those up, and yeah, definitely a great question. Thanks, Nicole. All right, 2 more minutes here before I get to go for lunch. Michael, thank you. Another question here. Should we be concerned with what our competitors are charging? Should we get fake bids to compare our price to theirs? Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It really, I mean, that question really comes back to how you're performing, I think. And so if you're finding that your close rate is starting to get low, you're not selling the amount of work that you're trying to sell, that's going to be a good chance for you to start to reconsider what you're charging and to look at, is it the price that's our problem? Is it, is our method of sales? Is it potentially our customers, the job? There's a wide variety of things there. Do I ever suggest getting fake bids? I mean, that's up to you. I mean, you can decide whether you feel that's within your business ethics. But getting an understanding of your marketplace is what's important, and that's going to allow you to position yourself properly, pay properly, do all those types of things. So yeah, thanks, Mike. We got another question here. Okay, sorry, what was that, Stacey? Okay, we got a couple more here. Then we're going to wrap it up here, about 3 minutes. So we got Seb Campbell. Thank you very much for the question. Are you going over industry standard? Hourly rate is 85 standard. So this whole discussion about hourly rate really comes down to, again, your business. $85 in today's marketplace, depending on where you are, might be high. It may also be low. And so doing this evaluation and doing the calculations is what's going to give you a sense of what it takes for your business. Seb, you may be incredibly efficient, and you may find that you can operate with an incredibly low overhead, or your production team you don't have to pay them very much, in which case you can possibly lower your price, still make the profit that you're hoping to achieve, and outbid your competition. But the key here is an understanding. So industry standard, what we're referring to, is the industry standard breakdown of what a company typically is paying for each individual element of their business. So yeah, thanks, Seb, appreciate that. All right, another question here from Neri. How do salespeople get paid? I hear they get a 10% commission. That is another great question. We don't deal too much with salespeople commissions here. I can only comment on that it can be all over the map. There's a wide variety of ways that people pay salespeople, and this is one question we get a lot. And so we hope to run a webinar on this as well, as ways to pay salespeople effectively. A 10% commission may work great for you, but you need to make sure that's built in. So we're dealing with an hourly rate that you're billing. Sales commissions go into your overhead, and you need to make sure if you're paying 10% that you're allocating that cost into overhead in order to ensure you're still making the profit you're trying to achieve. So that's what I would say there. But again, it can be all over the place on that. There's a wide variety of ways of doing that. Last question here from Gigi. What should be the close rate? We got a few other questions here. Okay. Close rate, again, that's going to vary tremendously. But where we see success is when people vet their potential leads well, and that results in a 50% or higher close rate. Not saying that's for everybody. It's definitely something to strive for a lot of people, but it's a number to look at because you don't want every job. That's just the reality of it, and we all want to strive for a kind of a balance there. So for those of you who are less than that, no problem. Something to look at and try to strive for. All right, Seb. Salary plus commission on production. So 4% and increase based on how sales have in the year. I'm not sure I quite understand the question, Seb. Maybe you can clarify there. This is potentially an answer to Gigi's question. Sales pay scale. Thank you, Seb. Okay, so Seb is just commenting on Gigi's question. So Gigi, Seb says, salary plus sales of production, so 4% and increase based on how much sales you have in a year. Seb, we see that formula a lot. I think it's a great formula, but yeah, there is other ways to skin that cat for sure. So Gigi, maybe take a note, take a look, see if that works for you. But yeah, guys, thanks so much for your time. We're gonna wrap it up. I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, feel free to send us a note. We like doing this. We just don't know if it's of value. And if you found it of value today, shoot us a note. It helps us really be proactive to deliver content and just to be there for everybody. So we'll be releasing this video, the webinar. Like I said, take a second or third look at it. Try to digest it. It's hard on the first time. I understand that. But this is here for you to build your business, be successful, and get that life back that you're looking for, that you set up for at the start. So thanks, everybody. We're going to wrap this up. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.